Well, what started on the 28th of February continued till the day, about 40 days of relentless bombings. The United States, Israel and Iran, however, have agreed now for a 14-day ceasefire, bringing a temporary halt to hostilities. However, U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance has termed the truce to be fragile, even as there is a cautious optimism that it could lead to a more permanent end to the conflict, while at the same time Iran is reportedly still considering to plan to impose tolls on vessels transiting the strategically crucial Strait of Hormuz. Now, Iran's plans around the Strait of Hormuz appear to be evolving, with reports suggesting that Tehran is still considering a transit toll on ships using key global oil route. Earlier proposals pointed to $2 million per ship charge that was backed by a draft parliament bill in which 100 to 130 ships crossing daily could have generated nearly 70 to 90 billion US dollars annually. But now there seems to be a shift, with fresh reports indicating that Iran now may charge $1 per barrel oil in tankers payments, like in, when it comes to cryptocurrency or something, or even when it comes to charging in yuan. We are looking at, as far as in this 2-week ceasefire is now being suggested, what could be the plan that what we are now looking at on part of Iran could be, because this is something which Iran is setting to monetize as far as the Strait of Hormuz is concerned. Already, when it comes to the legal hurdles in its parliament, that seems to have been cleared. But all of these developments that are now taking place at the time where there seems to be a lot of mistrust between the warring sides, between US, Israel and Iran.
Do you believe that the reports that are now emerging about Iran possibly levying $2 million a vessel for clearance of passage through the Straits of Hormuz? Some reports even suggest that Iran could charge $1 a barrel as well. Do you believe all this amounts to a violation of the United Nations Convention of the Law of the Seas, if indeed such a proposal is actually implemented?
Yes. Iran has no right to block the Strait of Hormuz. That is certainly illegal. What I will say, though, is that I don't think Iran necessarily has any compunction about doing it, right? They've already done it over the last month. They have extracted fees from some vessels that have gone through. And I think we need to think about this in economic terms, right? If you're an oil tanker that's carrying a couple million barrels of oil, and that oil is being sold for over $100 a barrel, maybe charging $1 or $2 a barrel doesn't feel like that much. It might not be that expensive for any single shipment of oil. But if you add it up for Iran, if they're charging $2 million a ship, that equals about $100 billion of additional revenue every single year for the Iranian government. So you have to ask yourself, if you were the Iranian government, would you charge that toll? Yes, you would, right? I mean, that's a huge amount of revenue that this country desperately needs now that they've got a lot of reconstruction to do. They've been under sanctions for 20 years. I think that's why it's logical for Iran to try to do this. The question is, will the United States, will the international community allow Iran to do this?
Now, let's get to a better understanding, because how this crypto payment system will actually work and what Iran is now planning to do as far as building up its own revenue for repair work. Reports suggest that tankers could be first required to share detailed cargo information with the Iranian authorities via email, following which each of the vessel would undergo individual inspection and clearance once approved. So what we are looking at, then Iran would go ahead to communicate with the toll amount, which must be paid within seconds in cryptocurrency like Bitcoin, a system which is actually designed to avoid tracking or freezing of funds under international sanctions. So is Iran now trying to maximize as far as its benefit to monetize when it comes to the Strait of Hormuz? Because why does this proposed crypto toll actually matter? Because as one level, it acts as a sanctions workaround, as a certain way that Iran is now working around the sanctions, allowing payments to bypass the global banking systems as well, and making it harder for the US and its allies to track or to freeze the funds, while reducing their reliance on dollar-based transactions at another level. It also gives Iran strategic leverage when it comes to tightening its own control through transit of the Strait of Hormuz and turning into a critical choke point into a potential revenue stream. And finally, the use of cryptocurrency enables instant transactions, allowing payments to be made within seconds. Now, what we are looking at, because there have been fresh concerns over the ceasefire in West Asia that reports that Iran once again has halted when it comes to the vessel movement through the Strait of Hormuz. And this comes in the backdrop of fresh Israeli strikes that has also been reported in Lebanon. Now, what is being said, according to Iranian media, that tanker traffic has been stopped because of the Israeli strikes reported in Lebanon. Let's connect with, Mayank on this. Mayank, as we have been discussing, when it comes to this very troubled truce that we are looking at, why wasn't the Strait of Hormuz, in the time that for decades that Iran has been facing US sanctions, maximized its benefit over its control over the region?
So I think whenever the planning was done for the operations, Strait of Hormuz was never the part of the plan, because initially, when you speak to the experts and the kind of operations they were continued, it was believed that air raids would be enough to bring the level of destruction to that extent that regime would fall. And right from the beginning, and I need to quote a report which was National Intelligence Committee report of the US, and that was profusely reported about by the Washington Post. And in that, they had brought out that right in the beginning, the National Intelligence Committee brings out the collective wisdom of almost 18 intelligence agencies of the US. They had right in the beginning talked about regime change and used a word unlikely, that it won't fall. But it was not reported that whether that report was put to light or was briefed about to the president or not. So what I'm trying to tell you is actually operations, they had a different objective, and many experts, they said that Strait of Hormuz was never part of the plan. The way it has been maximized as a strategic tool by Iran. So if you see, that also became a reason for which the other people have come to the table,
yes,
and to a common table and I have agreed for the ceasefire.
Yes. And of course, when it comes to the kind of currency that actually it wants, the transactions to actually take place, does it also undermine when it comes to the use of dollar, as a currency which is often used world over in trade? Let's also talk about India's position here on the Strait of Hormuz, because, however, that also remains clear, with New Delhi, however, coming out to say that it is closely monitoring the developments and has been in constant touch with the Iranian side to ensure that there is safe passage. However, noting that several Indian ships have already crossed the Strait of Hormuz without any risk, while also emphasizing that navigation and global commerce must continue uninterrupted, even as the government seems to be underlying the safety of the Indian vessels. That continues to remain to be a top priority. Let's, in the meantime, also talk about Times Now's managing editor, Zaka Jacob, who also spoke to Israel's envoy to India, Reuven Azar, and the Iranian Supreme Leader's representative in India, Abdul Hakim Elahi. And here's what they have to say on the evolving situation in the Strait of Hormuz. And, of course, as far as Iran and India relationship is concerned, it remains strong.
So one of the big concerns has been around the Strait of Hormuz. Have these last 40 days not shown to Israel and to America, and certainly to the rest of the world, that Iran can use that as a pain point, as a point of leverage, and thereby get America and Israel to the negotiating table?
Well, first of all, we were at the negotiating table before this operation started, and it was Iran that used the negotiation time just to stall time and continue building capabilities. So now we are in a situation in which they have paid a huge price for that. Okay, and if they will go back to the tactic of losing time or stalling, they will have to pay the price again. Now, when it comes to the Straits of Hormuz, I think it's a huge boomerang against Iran, because they said that they are going to charge countries, and now they committed in a temporary ceasefire, not in a permanent ceasefire, committed to allow free movement. Now, we know that this is something that is very important to the international community, and actually the Indian government has issued a statement today that demands that, an impeded flow of shipping in international waterways. That is what international law demands. So if the regime decides to go again and try to impede movement, they will have to pay the price.
No, but the Iranian Navy, for example, has said that every ship that passes through the Strait of Hormuz will now have to pay a toll. It's part of their 10-point proposal. So net-net, the 10-point proposal says that they will charge every ship.
I can take a piece of paper and put whatever demands that I want, but the commitment in the context of the 2-week ceasefire is a complete and unimpeded opening of the Straits of Hormuz. If they don't comply with that, it means they don't comply with the ceasefire.
So in these next
and President
2 weeks,
Trump has said that very clearly.
In these next 2 weeks, not a single ship will be tolled $2 million per ship. Is that what you're saying?
That's what President Trump said.
No. What about the Iranians? The Iranians are the ones who are tolling, not America.
Yes.
Have they committed
Well,
to not tolling any of the ships?
Exactly.
For the next 2 weeks?
Yes.
That's your understanding?
Yes.
Okay. So tell me this. At the end of it, net, the Strait of Hormuz, which was an open, free waterway before this war began, hasn't that now become a closed, chargeable waterway? Isn't that net what this war has ended up achieving?
No, what this war achieved is the removal of two existential threats, okay, that for us were imminent. Look, we have this doctrine of impeding fanatical leaders that have sworn to destroy us from acquiring weapons of mass destruction that would allow them to implement their plan. It started in '81 with Begin, Prime Minister Begin. It continued in 2007 with Prime Minister Olmert in Syria, and we are doing it now again. So we have a very consistent policy. It has nothing to do with the Strait of Hormuz. The fact that the regime, the Iranian regime, is trying to divert attention and punish countries, including their friends, with these ridiculous demands that have nothing to do with international law and completely unacceptable, it's a diversion. Look, they're trying to do a diversion of the context and the dialogue and the discourse in order to divert attention from the fact that they have been completely devastated.